Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Coming up on the show today, stocks are down and oil prices are up as war in the Middle East threatens an energy crisis. President Trump says the spike will be temporary, but will it? Up first, though, our top story. Iran has selected a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, just a week after his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in U.S. Israeli strikes. The younger Khamenei has been described as, quote, the power behind the robes. So who is he? And what could his selection mean for this war? For that, I want to bring in NBC News contributor Hooman Majd. Hi, Hooman.
Hi, Yasmin. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you. Let's talk first about what we know about Mojtaba. I know his wife was killed early on in this war. Walk us through what more we know about him.
Well, his wife and his mother and his father. What we know of him is that he's 56 years old. He was probably the closest advisor that Ayatollah Khamenei, the previous supreme leader who was assassinated, had basically by his side throughout his career, at least after the Iran-Iraq war, where Mojtaba did fight against the Iraqi invasion. He's not a very public figure. He basically shows up once a year at the big rally commemorating the revolution, February 14th, every year. But that's pretty much the extent of it. Mojtaba being someone who was well known inside Iran as being very close to the supreme leader and being very close to the IRGC, basically setting up that connection between the supreme leader's office, what's called the Beit, and the military force, which is the IRGC, one of the military forces in Iran. So most Iranians, I would say, vast majority of Iranians inside Iran know exactly who he is, do believe that he's as hardline, if not more hardline, than his father. Before this war, many people would think that he's a possible replacement for the supreme leader if the supreme leader were to die of natural causes. But there was a lot of opposition as well to that because the hereditary supreme leadership is not something that the revolution had ever conceived of. And in fact, the supreme leader himself was against it and had said he was against it. And of course, the founder of the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khamenei, had always been against hereditary.
Right, because it was more reminiscent of the monarchy that they overthrew with Reza Pahlavi.
Correct.
You know, it's interesting because you talk about Mojtaba's connection to the IRGC, how he was kind of the intermediary between his father's office as a supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guard. And he also fought in the Iran-Iraq war. He was known to have helped elect Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the hardline president, in 2005 as well. What about his potential approach to this war, considering he does come from more of a military background and is considered more conservative than his own father?
Well, I mean, I think the issue here is also there's got to be an element of revenge, I would have to think, and wanting to fight the United States and give it a bloody nose, as it were. You kill a person's father, mother, sister, niece. You're starting to get to the point where that person's not going to forgive. I think the Assembly of Experts, an elected body by the people, 88 Ayatollahs, probably under some pressure from the council, which is the council that was fulfilling the duties of the supreme leader in his absence in this last week, probably put some pressure on the Ayatollahs that we really need to show a unified regime, a secure regime that can handle a succession like this in the middle of a war, especially in the middle of a war that is quite brutal and involves bombs falling every day, oil depots burning, Tehran being, partially evacuated by as many residents as who do have a place to go somewhere else. In the middle of all that, to say that, we're just moving ahead like the Constitution says. We voted, for the new supreme leader. We had a council running things until today. So I think that's really the biggest message.
And I wonder if it's also the possibility of a more militaristic approach in leadership under Mojtaba as the supreme leader versus under Khamenei. And not to say that Khamenei also did not lead the IRGC, but considering his connections to the IRGC and his former service to them as well during the Iran-Iraq war.
Well, sure. I mean, I think at least until the war is over, for sure. Well, one thing a lot of Americans, and I think even in the media, don't realize, the supreme leader isn't the supreme leader of Iran. He's the supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution. So the revolution continues. The IRGC are not the Islamic Republic guardians of Iran. They're the Islamic Republic guardians of the revolution. It's very specific. That's why there's this ideological connection between those two bodies to protect the revolution. No, that doesn't mean it's not to also protect Iran, obviously, because Iran is a revolutionary state in their minds, in the minds of the regime. Iran is always a revolutionary state.
So Israel has made it clear that Mojtaba has a target on his back now. President Trump told ABC News that, quote, Mojtaba is not going to last long without his approval. Iran last week said they're going to stop bombing their neighbors. That was a statement that was released by President Pezeshkian. So what is the plan here going forward for this war, especially when it comes to Iran's approach militarily and the potential for this supreme leader to now be the next target?
Well, I think he is the next target. I mean, that's pretty clear. The Israelis have made that pretty clear. The Israelis have very good intelligence inside Iran. They have agents inside Iran. They've admitted they have agents. The Iranians have admitted that Mossad operates in Iran. I assume that he is going to be kept underground, away from any potential threat, and by very, very, most loyal, trusted guards. Because there was the report that some of the guards, Khamenei's guards, on the day he was assassinated, had been compromised by the Israelis. Now, they could have been compromised just by their cell phones, not by actually being agents of Mossad. But regardless, the plan in Iran appears to be, I mean, you said Dr. Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, one of the three council members, had apologized and said, we're not going to attack the Gulf countries. What he meant was, and what he actually did say, and the IRGC sort of like clarified it, that we're not going to attack civilian targets. If there were civilian targets, the Iranian foreign minister on NBC this week said that there is sometimes collateral damage. So he was saying it's not intentional if let's say, for example, a residential building in Dubai gets hit. But they did say they're going after U.S. interests. U.S. interests obviously are bases, ships, anything that is a U.S. interest in the region. And that's going to continue. And it's very clear because, hours after the president of Iran made that public statement saying we're not going to attack civilians, they attacked civilians. So it's just to prove a point that we are going to do that. I think that's going to continue.
I think it proves 2 points, though, that yes, we are going to do that, but also, do they even have the capability not to? I.e., like, do they have the most sophisticated type of, military materials in order to avoid civilian casualties?
I would argue that they don't, in the same way that, no army does to 100% accuracy. We just know that. I mean, did the United States intend to bomb that schoolyard? I doubt it. I mean, we now see the images of a Tomahawk missile, which only the United States has, landing on the schoolyard. So, yes, there was a base next door, a naval base next door, but under international law, the rules of war, you're not supposed to attack even a military target if there's a possibility of a civilian target next door being damaged or harmed.
We do want to note, though, that the U.S. says it's still investigating the strike on the school and that President Trump is blaming Iran for the strike. But Hooman, if Mojtaba is in fact assassinated by Israeli or U.S. forces, if he's killed, what happens then?
I think the Assembly of Experts has anticipated that, given the threat, and they meet again. The 88 or a quorum meets, and they select someone else. Unless the regime completely collapses, then I think it continues, and the regime is, secure at this point and is able to fight back. And also, you have to remember, this regime has been around for almost half a century. So, it has a deep, deep bench, a really deep bench.
Hooman Majd, thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Pleasure to be here.
Meanwhile, the death toll on both sides continues to grow. You have 7 U.S. service members, according to U.S. Central Command, who have died so far in this conflict, and more than 1,200 Iranians have been killed, and that is according to the Iranian Red Crescent Society. The Middle East conflict is throwing oil markets into turmoil. Crude surged above $100 a barrel on Sunday for the first time since 2022. Then the West Texas Intermediate, which is the benchmark for American oil prices, briefly touched $120. The ripple effect is already hitting consumers here in the U.S., impacting everything from gas to groceries. So for more on this, I want to bring in our senior business correspondent, Christine Romans. Hi, Christine. Hi, Christine.
Hi there.
Okay.
Right.
Let's talk what's happening. I mean, where do you even start with this?
100 surprised me. $100 a barrel surprised me, because Friday, when I was calling my sources and saying what is next week gonna hold for us,
Yeah.
I was getting from, well, we're going to stay right here at 90, and so gas prices will keep going up, but maybe they'll stop at $3.90 a gallon.
Yeah.
One person said, if you get mid 90s in terms of oil prices, you will see $4 a gallon for gas. And boom, last night, 100, just like that.
So you talk about what's happened since Friday, right? You have essentially this blockade at the Strait of Hormuz. It's not official, but 20% of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. They have to get through there to get to where they're going. Then you have these oil refineries inside Iran that were bombed over the weekend as well. You have all of these developments in the last couple of days. What does that do to gas prices and other goods?
So it sends oil prices higher. Jet fuel prices are up. Diesel fuel prices are up. Those affect airlines, the cost of plane tickets. Diesel affects farmers and truckers. 75% of the weight of goods in the United States travels on a truck at some point. So all of that got more expensive here. And we just have to see how it's going to factor in. I mean, look, you can look at the stock market and the reaction of the stock market and say, oh, just sit back, don't change your 401k, there's no reason to panic. But if you're a truck driver, this is not hypothetical. It's not, you're not going to lose money if you sell. You are spending the money right now when you're filling up the tank.
At the State of the Union back in February, just before the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, the president was actually touting low gas prices, along with other things that were happening inside the president's economy, Trump's economy now, which is what we're in. And he said gas in Iowa was at $1.85 a gallon. Today, gas in Des Moines, according to Gas Buddy, is a little over $3 just in the last few weeks. He was asked this weekend again about how Americans should square this, reconcile this with the war.
Figured oil prices would go up. We said, well, they'll also come down. They'll come down very fast.
So in case that was a little hard to hear, the president essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they figured they'd go up, but then they're going to go down, and it's going to go down pretty fast. What do you make of the president's response there? Is there a point in which there is such a bottleneck that this becomes a persistent problem?
First of all, I hope he's right. In a perfect world, if suddenly it became clear that there were no nuclear capabilities in Iran and the entire Middle East region was safe and secure and people were pumping oil and moving oil, that would be an amazing development. I don't know when that's going to happen. How quickly will gas prices come down if there's some resolution or clarity? We've seen the studies. Gas prices go up much faster than they come down. It's just the nature of the beast. But we've gone from $67 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate Crude, WTI, from 67 to above 100 in a little over a week.
Wow.
That's really something. Last week was the biggest 1 week surge in oil prices ever since we've been charting this contract back in the 80s. So it's a really unusual situation here. And you're starting to hear things that the White House says, the administration says it will do, provide insurance for these shippers, maybe have the Navy, if necessary, escort ships. I mean, the G7 nations are talking about whether they can maybe together release some crude oil together from their strategic reserves. The word we got out of G7 today is they're not quite there yet. these are all small things on the margin that can help, but not alleviate a fifth of the world's oil supply that's not moving right now.
You know, we don't know what's going to happen here, but if you're talking to some experts looking at what's happening here, they say this could literally be the biggest energy crisis since the 1970s. They're pointing historically back to the revolution last time around, right? The Iranian Revolution in 1979 and what then President Jimmy Carter had to deal with. And we know, obviously, Carter dealt with the repercussions of that energy crisis, losing his bid for re-election. President Trump is inside of a midterm election year, right? He's not directly on the ballot, but Republicans are, and his power is, right, in Congress. How much does gas prices, do oil prices, does the economy overall, right? How much does that fuel how Americans end up voting?
It is a huge psychological, the price of gas. I will say, though, when you compare it to the 70s, we use much less gas per family today than we did in the 70s. Think of all of the fuel economy standards over the years. Because of things like the energy crisis in the 70s, we realized we have to start producing ourselves. The United States has to be more energy dependent. So it's a very different...
Which the president has touted as wanting to be more energy independent.
And that didn't start on his watch. That started on the Obama administration.
On top of that, I want to talk Russia for a moment, because then you have America saying, okay, we are essentially lifting sanctions on Moscow so that they can then sell more oil to India to, relieve some of what we're seeing in the oil industry across the board. But then what is Moscow going to do with that money that they're getting from India? They're then going to fuel the war with Ukraine. And we're now getting reporting that they're providing intelligence to the Iranians, which speaks to more of what you're talking about.
It's policy at cross purposes, right? You were tough on Russia with these sanctions against Russian oil, which is the money that fuels the war machine. And now you're going to allow the sanctioned oil to be sold to India so that you can alleviate some of this problem. Now, the Treasury Department made it very, very clear this is only Russian oil that's on boats right now. And this is not something that's going to last long term. It's just very short term, and it won't really materially benefit Russia. That's what the administration says.
But they weren't allowing it last week, but they're allowing it this week.
Exactly, because prices have spiked higher because of the American and Israeli foray into Iran and the Middle East.
So putting this all together, Christine, you and I were texting last week about those jobs numbers on Friday.
That's right.
And I said I was looking for anything positive from you in the makeup chair this morning, and I couldn't really get anything out of you.
Oh, and I had a terrible quip.
What impact could this have on overall inflation and economic growth in this country with our current outlook?
I thought the Fed had the hardest job in finance late last year.
Yeah.
And it's even worse now. Because if you have oil prices surging higher, and they are surging, and you have a job market that is showing signs of real weakness, which it did in February, you want to cut interest rates to help the job market. But if you cut interest rates, you risk fueling inflation. And remember, it wasn't very long ago that we had a real inflation problem in 2021, 2022, in part because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
Right.
That was the last time we saw oil prices this high. Mm-hmm. And gas prices went to $5 a gallon. I'm not forecasting that, but here we are again, the highest gas prices and oil prices since that period, that painful period. And the Fed has got to be very careful about cutting interest rates and having a redux of all of that by having interest rates too low.
Christine Romans, thank you. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.